I would like to start this morning by just giving a warm round of applause to Mr. Mike Buchanan, who has killed himself making this possible. And I am the quintessential keyboard warrior. I'm really, really brave in my kitchen behind a keyboard, and not really that brave right now. So bear with me while I get my bearings here. I'm going to talk to you today about how feminism infantilizes women. I want to start by saying we don't pick on feminism just because it's a hateful, stupid ideology that's immune to facts and logic. There's lots of those out there. For example, being a vegan. Or a Manchester United fan. We pick on feminism for the simple fact that it stands in the way of the solutions that we're looking for. Feminism isn't interested in gender equality, never has been, never will be. And feminism is, in the ultimate irony, the biggest source of misogyny in our modern culture. And I'm going to explain that today. All right. Oh, here's my little thingy. A couple of days ago, our favorite internet provocateur, the fabulous supervillain of the internet, Milo, he tweeted this: "We need aspirational role models. We need fantasy. We need the unattainable. We need something to strive for." I'm supposed to keep this clean, so to heck with feminism. And a long time ago, on a college campus far, far away, I used to call myself a feminist. Because at that time, the marketing department, which was probably run by men, understood that to sell feminism, it needed to be aspirational. It had to be something that flattered, celebrated, and empowered women. So feminism was Demi Moore shaving off her hair for a shot at being a Navy SEAL. It was Sarah Connor taking on the Terminator and shutting down Skynet. It was Buffy slaying vampires. It was Xena taking on the underworld. It was Ripley with a flamethrower in one hand and a little girl in the other saying, "Get away from her, you unlikable person." It was the Spice Girls being sassy, marching across the stage, telling you what they want, what they really, really want. I mean, who wouldn't embrace this version of feminism? I could be a Navy SEAL, totally. I don't really want to, but I could. It's about equality of opportunity. And that was an easy sell. That's what feminism used to mean. And when you talk to older generations of feminists, that's what they're thinking of. They're thinking of feminism as equality of opportunity. We're going to take down the barriers and let you ladies be whatever you want. And I personally took that message to heart. You can be whatever you want. Awesome. I'm going to be a wife and a mother. That went over really well, let me tell you. Camille Paglia called this kind of feminism Amazon feminism. And I think she's one of the most interesting feminists out there. She wrote Sexual Personae, I believe, around 1980. And she already saw the cracks in a way that a lot of us didn't. What Camille said was, all right, ladies, you're going to throw off the patriarchy. Understand that the patriarchy doesn't actually oppress you, it protects you. This is something that keeps you safe. So if you're going to throw it off, here's what this means. You're going to have to remain vigilant. The world is full of risks. Men protect you in general from those risks. You don't want to be protected anymore? Great, protect yourselves. Learn to defend yourselves. Understand that bad things are going to happen to you. That's called life. When bad things happen to you, you're going to have to take responsibility for the role you played in that. You're going to have to learn how to process that. You're going to have to get over it. And most importantly, you need to move on. You can't be defined by the bad things that will happen to you. And I think a lot of feminists didn't realize that. They just bought this whole men oppress us, patriarchy is bad, let's get rid of it. They didn't understand what that meant, what they were giving up. And in particular, campus feminists didn't understand that. So they just went whole bore, yeah, opportunity feminists. Let's get out there, let's compete with men. See, the thing about opportunity feminism is that men were never the enemy. They were the gold standard. They were the people to compete with. Whatever it is that men do, we're going to do that too, and we're going to do it better than them.
In heels.
In heels, backwards. Yeah, that's right. Well, let's see how that worked out. Not very well. Modern feminism had to make a spin away from equality of opportunity because it just wasn't working out. Ripley cannot come out of the spacecraft, I'm afraid. Someone chalked Trump on the floor of the cargo bay and she just can't even. She is inside waiting for the trauma counselor to arrive, eating cookies, and we're all gonna die. Here's what happens when you compete with men. The best football team in Australia, the Matildas, played some 15-year-old boys. 7-0. Those weren't even the best 15-year-old boys. That if women are going to compete head-to-head with men on the things that men are good at and men value, we're going to lose. That's just reality. Instead of turning around and saying, okay, wait a minute, maybe we need to reconsider what the gold standard is. Maybe we need to reconsider the terms of the competition. They decided to switch to outcome feminism. I've got the occupational categories up here to show you what I mean when I say feminism is misogyny. The most common jobs since the beginning of time, really, but this just goes back to 1950. What do women do? They organize stuff. They provide services. They sell stuff. They cook, they clean, they tidy, and they teach. What do they do in 2010? Now that they have the opportunity to be Navy SEALs, they sell stuff. They keep things tidy. They cook, they clean. They take care of little kids. They take care of sick people. Women are still women. Give women an opportunity to do whatever they want. They don't want to be Navy SEALs. They want to take care of the old, the sick, the young. They want to cook. They want to clean. They want to decorate. They want to keep things organized for the men who are actually doing the work. And feminism hates women for that. Feminism hates the fact that they've thrown every opportunity open to women, and women have said, yeah, no, it's all right. I'm just gonna serve some food here. Maybe I'll work at Starbucks. Clean up the fatbergs. Are you kidding me? No, I would rather fold clothes at the Gap. What academic feminism would like you to believe is that women are not cleaning out the fatbergs in the sewers because men are mean and won't let them. Women aren't in coal mines because men hate them. Women can't do dangerous, dirty, filthy jobs because men are jerks. And we need to fix this. So how are we going to fix this? How do we convince women that no flamethrowers. No, that's not. We're not going with flamethrowers anymore. We're going to focus on how men victimize you, how mean they are, what jerks they are, how they keep you from doing all these really important, fun things that all the guys get to do. So what are the methods by which you... I mean, this is rather dramatic. It's within a decade, feminism went from telling women that they could do anything, pick up the flamethrower, defeat Skynet, be a Navy SEAL, and within a decade, they're like, you can't handle chalk. That's an accomplishment. I think we got to give them credit for that. That's an epic amount of propaganda. So how do they do this? How do they manage this? One of the ways is through trigger warnings and safe spaces. Like many of the roads to hell, this one too was paved with good intentions. Trigger warnings and safe spaces come out of combat psychology. For as long as human beings have been beating each other to death, I think we've realized that that has a negative emotional fallout on some of the combatants. And we've had various vocabularies to describe that. During the Napoleonic Wars, soldiers were said to suffer from exhaustion when they got tired and traumatized by killing other soldiers. During the Civil War, the American Civil War, this is kind of poetic actually. Traumatized soldiers were said to have a soldier's heart. In World War I, it was known as shell shock. By World War II, they called it combat fatigue. And by the time the Vietnam War came around, we started to develop the clinical language of post-traumatic stress disorder, which is how we know combat psychology today. Now, you can read about that in the New Republic there. That's a very interesting history of the origins of trigger warnings and safe spaces. Now, Vietnam War veterans used to gather mostly on college campuses, simply because that was where the space was, and that's where a lot of the anti-war activity was taking place. They used to gather into something called rap sessions, and their goal was to share their experiences of trauma, what they had been through. The point was to be able to process those experiences so that they could share them. They wanted to be able to talk to other people what they had been through, what their experiences were. They wanted to help the anti-war effort. And whether you agree with that or not, they were actually completely correct in how you process extreme trauma like combat. You share your experiences. Controlled exposure. This is something that we've known about for quite some time. One of the most famous social scientists in this area is Albert Bandura. And he has established, beyond all question, that hiding from or ignoring trauma doesn't work. It simply exacerbates it. What you have to do is do controlled exposure to it. That's how you control it, often in remarkably short periods of time. So the Vietnam combat veterans were absolutely right. Gather together, talk about what you've been through, share your experiences so that you are able to process them and they're not quite so traumatizing. Now, it took the leftists on the academy about 2 seconds to realize that trauma, sharing experiences of trauma, could not only be used to communicate, it could be used to control. So what they have done is simply strip the efficacy out of trigger warnings and safe spaces. The point is no longer to process that trauma. They want you to trauma bond, but they also want you to feel like there's nothing that you can do to overcome that. You are trapped by it forever. It defines you. This is one of the ways that they are able to teach women and their male allies that they are helpless, that they are morally equivalent to children. And almost anything counts as trauma. This is the whole concept of microaggression. So, for example, if you go in the hallway and go to the bathroom, the male symbol appears first, which clearly means this facility likes men more than women. And then when you go through the doors, the women's facility is actually first, because they think we're weak, right? We can't walk to the back. They obviously hate women. So I went to ask the patriarch who runs this place, Catherine, about why the Excel Center hates women, and she just had a lot of internalized misogyny. That conversation that went nowhere. It was terrible. Trigger warnings and safe spaces. They teach women that they're helpless idiots. Yes means yes. This is the sexual standard of consent that is rolling out across North America and is probably going to roll out across the UK very soon too. For a long time, the definition of rape followed English common law, which defined rape as carnal knowledge of a woman forcibly and against her will. Those three things had to be present in order for rape to be considered rape. There had to be penetration, there had to be force, and the woman had to indicate her lack of consent. It was actually kind of startling that it was only in the year 2000 that we started to ask the question, can consent be withdrawn after it has been issued? Traditionally, the answer was no, that once you consented, you are in. You're on the roller coaster, baby. There's no getting off. Once you've said yes, that's it. You don't get to withdraw. The courts then decided, well, that's a bit crazy. All right. So the no means no standard of consent became the legal standard. SB967, passed in California last year, I believe, was the very first yes means yes standard of legal consent. This changes sexual consent so that affirmative consent means affirmative, conscious, and voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity. Lack of protest or resistance does not mean consent, nor does silence mean consent. Okay, I want to focus on how these two concepts treat women as children. There's so much to talk about with consent laws, but I want to talk about how this particularly infantilizes women. There's a long tradition in the West of veering between two different paradigms of sexuality for women, commonly referred to as the virgin and the whore. So at some points in our history, we have thought of women as being fundamentally whores, that they are just sexually rapacious beasts, and if there were no controls on women, women would just run around and hump everything they could find. And men are sort of dispassionate and rational about this, and they need to control women's sexuality. This is the attitude that informed the Salem witch trials, when you can read about it in Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter. We veered back and forth between that idea and then flipping it, which is, you'll probably recognize this from one of the speeches yesterday, that we currently live in the opposite idea, that women are virginal. Men are the sexually rapacious beasts, and if there's no controls, they'll just run around and hump everything they can find. And women are sort of dispassionate and asexual. No means no was a sort of sane bridge between those two ideas, that both men and women are considered fully human, fully human adults, including sexuality, that women are capable of experiencing sexual desire, of pursuing sexual experience, of enjoying it, and of consenting or not consenting to that. That the default setting, when you look at women or men, is that they are sexual beings. If they're not interested in having sex with you, they'll let you know. It doesn't necessarily have to be verbal. If someone punches you in the throat, that's a good indication they're not interested. Yes means yes flips that. Think about what yes means yes assumes. The default setting is that women are virginal, that they're simply blushing maidens, that they don't have sexual desire. It denies the full humanity of women. Now, in reality, these laws are gender neutral, and the first woman has been expelled from college under yes means yes consent laws, and more women are going to have their lives destroyed. It's really tough for me to feel any sympathy for them, since they're the ones who wrote the fucking laws, and there's lots of guys, sorry, Mike, there's lots of guys who've had their lives destroyed by these laws. So I'm not feeling a huge amount of sympathy that it's now catching women. But the default setting under yes means yes is that women have no sexual desire. This is exactly what Occidental College found in the first test case of SB967. John and Jane Doe both went out. They both consumed a fairly large amount of alcohol. Jane texted her friend that she wasn't coming home. She texted another friend that she needed birth control. Could she borrow a condom? Not borrow, like nobody wants that back. Could she just have one, please? There were multiple witnesses that saw enthusiastic consent between both parties. But when she woke up, she's like, wow, that was a lot of tequila, and what have I done? Someone has got to be to blame here, and it's not me. And the courts agreed with her, the kangaroo court in the college, of course. They agreed that John should have known, despite the fact that he was also drunk, he should have known that her default setting was virgin. Obviously, she's not going to have random sex with someone just because she had tequila. You should have known her default setting was that she doesn't have sexual desire, that all of this is just coming from alcohol consumption. His consumption doesn't matter. This denies the full humanity of women. It denies that women are adults, and it makes men responsible for women's sexuality. And this is coming from feminism. This is absolute madness, and it's going to start destroying more and more women. Yes means yes as a sexual standard of consent deeply infantilizes and denies the full humanity of women. Uh-oh. What happened? Oh, okay. Let's talk about domestic violence and the Duluth model. Again, lots of things to talk about here. I want to focus on the fact that the Duluth model assumes that the root cause of domestic violence is patriarchy. The root cause of men hitting women is that patriarchy requires men to use violence to keep women in line. So, of course, drugs, alcohol, not having a job, poverty, none of those things play any impact. Lack of conflict management, growing up in a poor household, none of those things matter about domestic violence. This is about men using violence to express their domination of women. Two things that I think really throw a wrench in this. There's lots of things that throw a wrench, but these are some big ones. Deborah Capaldi, this is a great study. She's looking at a systematic review of risk factors for intimate partner violence. What's the best thing that predicts whether or not you're going to get punched in the face in the kitchen? The best predictor is whether or not there are two women present. Lesbian households have the highest rates of domestic violence of all partnerships. You put two women together, those bitches just go at each other. And nobody's surprised by this, right? What's the next biggest predictor? Whether or not women hit men. It turns out they don't like that. Who knew? Now, a lot of men have been socialized into not hitting back. This is a big mistake, in my opinion. Lots of women are brave enough to hit men because they know they're not going to hit back. In unidirectional violence, where only one person throws a punch, 70% of the people hitting are women, because men don't hit back. So if patriarchy is the root cause of domestic violence, and women are throwing punches and not getting hit back, I don't think you're doing patriarchy right. You might need to work through that one. Where are women safest? Where are you least likely to experience not just domestic violence, but any violence of any kind? This one makes feminists really scream. In traditional nuclear families where the mother is married to the biological father of her children, that is the safest place for women and children from all types of violence. So again, I'm not sure you're doing patriarchy right. If patriarchy requires violence against women, then we would expect to see in the stereotypical expression of patriarchy in the nuclear family really high rates of violence, and it's actually the lowest. We don't like to talk about it, but women and children are safest under the protection of a man who loves them and who is biologically related to the children. All right, my last one, fat acceptance. Despite Milo's insistence, saying that fat shaming actually works, and he's referring to this study here. I don't actually think there's a legitimate argument to be made for being mean or disrespectful or cruel to fat people. That's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the philosophical orientation fat acceptance encourages in women. That's why it infantilizes women. This is not an argument to say be mean to fat people or mock them. I think that's stupid. The fat acceptance movement, like a lot of these things, was started by a guy, 1969. He was very upset by the fact that his overweight wife was discriminated against in a way that he thought was threatening her life. She went to the doctor with chest pains, and the doctor said, yeah, just lose some weight. That's not very helpful. So he started fat acceptance. Susie Orbach quickly picked that up in, 1978. She noticed that there's this relationship between the shape of a woman's body and whether or not people find that body sexually attractive. Oh. Wow. And she decided this was oppression. Completely ignoring the fact, of course, that, men may value women based on the numbers on a scale, but men don't get away from being valued by a set of numbers. Can I see your bank account? And I suspect it might be a little bit easier to shift the numbers on a scale than the numbers in your bank account. So men and women oppress each other if you're going to consider that oppression. Men and women evaluate each other on objective measures. Susie just ignored that. Fat is a feminist issue. Men who don't like fat women are jerks. It's patriarchy, and they just don't know what they find sexually attractive. We can change this. Everybody gain a lot of weight, then they'll have no choice. And, okay, if you actually want to look at the strength with which people look at body image and evaluate body image, this study here by Legenbauer is quite interesting. Amongst lesbian partners, the emphasis that they put on body weight is almost nothing. They don't care. So the stereotype about lesbians being fat and hairy is actually true. There's generally some truth to all stereotypes. Heterosexual women, they have a slight preference for a low body weight, but again, the size of your wallet can reduce a lot of that anxiety. Doesn't really matter. Heterosexual men, they have a preference for more slender women, but it's not a deal breaker. There's other things that matter. Gay men, total deal breaker. These guys are brutal. They have extremely exacting physical standards. So, academic feminists took this study and said, well, look at this. I mean, women don't really care too much about body weight. I mean, when we're in relationships with each other, we're so morally superior, we don't care if you weigh 300 pounds. This is obviously patriarchy. It's obviously, and women need to fight back against patriarchy by gaining a lot of weight. I actually think this is one of the most tragic things that feminism has taught, especially young women, that if someone doesn't find you attractive, they're wrong. They are the ones with the problem, that you should be able to do whatever you want, and the other person's needs or preferences don't matter at all. And I think when you are very young and you gain a lot of body weight, it is almost impossible to remove that later in your life. And that's very tragic. They're setting these young women up for terrible disappointment. And I think we all see that in Trigglypuff, for example. What fat acceptance embraces is solipsism. It's the philosophical idea that the only person that you know exists for sure is yourself. That's a very, very childish philosophy. It's summed up by, I think, therefore I am, which is more accurately translated as, I can tell that I'm thinking, so I know I exist. I can't tell if you're thinking. Well, try playing chess with someone, or just getting to the bathroom. You can be pretty sure the people around you are thinking. But feminism encourages this kind of solipsism through fat acceptance in young women. The only person that you know that exists for sure is yourself. So don't care about anyone else. Don't take into account anyone else's preferences. They encourage them to think like 2-year-olds. This is an extremely childish way of thinking, and it's very, very psychologically damaging to women, setting them up for a lifetime of unhappiness. And where do they turn? To feminism, which just encourages them to gain some more weight and be a little bit more bitter, because that worked out so well in the past. So opportunity feminism, that feminism of flamethrowers, it says, be what you want, and we're going to take the barriers out of the way. And outcome feminism says, okay, never mind. Be what we want you to be. And if you can't be those things, find a man to blame because it's his fault. He's probably wearing a shirt, and that's why you didn't take physics. There is an Ellie Prizeman shirt here. This is why I'm not in physics, right there. He's sitting there. That's why I didn't land a rocket today, and I'm here. Modern campus feminism, this outcome feminist says, do not be strong, do not be courageous, do not be resilient, don't be capable, don't be satisfied, don't be determined, don't be discouraged. Okay, you can't, those are all the wrong things. What you have to be is weak, be afraid, be incapable, fragile, hesitant. Feminism hates women who behave like women. Feminism hates women who embrace femininity. Feminism is cancer, and we are the cure. Oh, I need to answer.
Questions for Janet?
This is not so much necessarily a question, more an observation from my sort of personal experience. For those who don't know, that I'm a university lecturer in Cardiff, so I've got lots of experience at the university media over quite a number of years. And I've noticed a difference in students, male and female, in how much more needy they've become. I think it's part of the sort of treating them as consumers now that they're paying a substantial amount of money here, as they always did in the UK, the US and Canada, where we need to try and sort of look after their emotional needs, personal tutors, which is fine up to a point. And whether it's this helicopter parenting, which sort of doesn't prepare them for the independence of being a student, because what I've noticed over a number of years is that it's how much more needy they become. It used to be dead and dying grandparents. Now it's switched to anxiety, mental health issues, and really that maybe the safe spaces and trigger warnings are all part of that, as well as anything sort of to do with feminism. So it's not just feminism, it's just a part of a sort of bigger narrative, the way we treat students, and frankly infantilize all students as children. We don't give them their independence, so that when we try and do it at university when they're 18, 19, the poor little darlings half the time can't cope, and we've got to find other ways of actually trying to sort of protect them from life, basically, in reality.
I think that's very true, and it's part of the whole program of the left, that if you can't depend on yourself, well, who do you depend on? You depend on the government. On the state, that's right. And one of the first things women voted to do was provide themselves with alimony so that they could rely on men's resources, and then started to vote for state spending so that the state effectively became their husband over time. And now they've turned the state into the father of their children. I think this is very much related to feminism, and that if you didn't have women voting to make these decisions, we would be living in a very different society. That it's women trying to make all men responsible for their choices instead of just the one man to whom they have obligations.
Just a quick follow-on to what this man said. It's not just helicopter parenting. The state is actually forcing parents into a more protective role. I don't know if you've heard about free-range parenting. Parents letting their children walk to the park by themselves. They can go to jail for this. And so you can't just blame the parents. We've institutionalized this.
Yeah, I think we're pretty far down a road that started in the 1970s with women's so-called liberation. Liberation from what? Yeah, liberation from the protection of men. They've made the world more dangerous. So in a way, it's kind of a rational reaction. We're going to remove men from our families and our children. That makes the world more dangerous. Now we have to be more protective. Well, you could have avoided that by not removing the men. So I understand what you're saying, and I do practice free-range parenting, but I happen to live in a part of the world where that's still considered pretty normal. It's all right for my 7-year-old to walk to school. That's very normal. But if I was trying to do that in a city in the U.S., yeah, I would literally be arrested for letting my 7-year-old walk to school with her 10-year-old brother. I would get arrested. The children would be taken into care. That's insane, but that is the reality. James.
Hi. Would you say, I think you probably would agree anyway, that feminism is a pathology in that it makes women who adopt that strategy extremely self-centered? And would you say from that we're creating a generation of sociopaths?
Wow. Yes, that would be the easy. I don't know enough about the clinical diagnosis of a sociopath. I would say for certain that we are creating a generation of deeply, deeply unhappy women, assuming that women's happiness is, the most important thing. If you look at the women in the world who report the greatest rates of happiness, they're women in the Netherlands, 90% of whom work part-time or not at all. And they have refused to accept the male standard as the gold standard, and they continue to value caregiving. I actually think if we made that the standard, let's make that the standard of your worth, your measurement in the world is how you care about other people, the things that you do to demonstrate your caring. You would see immediately that men and women are and have always been equal. Men demonstrate their caring by going out and providing financially. They don't have to do that. The overwhelming majority, choose to do that. Women demonstrate their caring for people through the actual work of doing domestic caregiving, washing dishes, doing laundry, making food, and they prefer to do that. Most men would rather go out to work than stay at home and cook. And for those men who don't want to do that, that's fantastic. Be who you are. There's room for everyone. But the standard for your worth as a human being should be, how do you care for other people? Not just the male standard of going out to work.
I just have a question. I always come back to the scientific investigation of all issues, and I think we succumb to the feelings and the emotional response. Is there any research around that you're aware of where you've actually looked at the influence of education in a feminist agenda sort of way as the effect on the emotional well-being of the students that have been subject to that education? So, the exaggeration of the fear, that sort of stuff, and where that results in the emotional well-being of, I shouldn't say the victim, but the indoctrinee.
I think maybe by proxy, a really good thing to look at would be the Atlantic's exploration of the drugging of the American boy, because that really talks about the feminization of primary schooling, which used to contain a lot of men. There used to be a lot of male teachers. And interestingly enough, my children go to a Christian school, even though I am an atheist. And that Christian school has half of the primary teachers are men, on the grounds that they represent the word of the loving authority of God, that they are walking examples of Christian masculinity. And so my children go to a school with tons and tons of primary teachers, and that makes such a huge difference in the tolerance for typical male behavior. You have a school that has almost all female teachers. I guarantee you're going to see a ton of drugging of boys and a few girls, simply for being boys or girls. I think if you have to drug your child just to go to school, that says a lot about their well-being, and perhaps they're not doing okay. So that would be the research I would point you to. Look at the drugging of the American boy. It's Esquire, sorry, not The Atlantic.
How have academic feminists taken to what you have to say? What have been as an academic person myself, I can only imagine, but I'm sure you've had some real experiences with this, and I'm wondering what they've been like.
Please die. Is generally what they say to me, the polite ones. No, they're not willing to engage in the debate at all. As far as they're concerned, there is no debate. That patriarchy is a fact, like gravity. It holds women down. There's no debate to be had at all with academic feminists. Of course, we do have a brilliant exception to that here with us, Dr. Janice Fiamengo. And I think Dr. Fiamengo could probably answer that question a lot in much more fullness for you.
Do you think there's a good way of convincing, this sort of millennial generation, to sort of see things from the perspective where, we're seeing things from here at this conference, or are they a lost cause, this generation?
I think leaving the European Union might be a good thing. Yeah, you know what? They need to undergo a little bit of actual hardship, not just I don't have enough money for a latte today. There's nothing, where I live in Canada, I can wear this shirt, for example, and get absolutely no negative feedback about it at all. In fact, I get lots of positive feedback. It's because I live in a harsh climate. It's very, very difficult to convince women that they are oppressed when they're in the kitchen making coffee and frying bacon while their husband is outside in minus 40, chipping an inch of ice off the car and shoveling the driveway. It's hard to convince me that I'm the oppressed one. It's very difficult in harsh climates. Our manufacturing base took a huge hit. There are a lot of families that survive on wild protein. They hunt for their food. And hunting is a lot more pleasant when you have a man to actually do it. It's easier too. So I think any little bit of hardship will teach women the value of men.
Janet, I was struck by your argument that you believe that women will never vote to change the all-male draft registration law to include women. I was surprised by that. I just assumed before I heard it that that women are willing to change the law under certain circumstances, but you feel that that's not going to happen. Could you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, it's not going to happen, and that's borne out in the U.S. repeatedly by feminist commenters and just regular commenters in the news everywhere. For how many years has the U.S. draft been in effect? Nobody cared. Men are drafted. Whatever. Who cares? Yeah, so what? We're going to draft women. Just end the draft. That is unconscionable. See, when it applied only to men, nobody cared. Whatever. Let them go die. But now that there's a possibility that women might be drafted, oh, all of a sudden it's a huge moral issue that needs immediate attention. That right there is the heart of women. It's what we do, unfortunately. Oh, thank you. Okay.